Liverpool have supposedly made an inquiry for Chelsea winger Pedro Neto. Tosin To Como has emerged as another option to join Cesc Fabregas's Como. Tosin, Chalobah, Badiashile and Disasi are all potential options in a swap deal for Maxence Lacroix. Chelsea are expected to come back with another bid for Granit Xhaka, but it's not much higher than it was before. Nicholas Jackson is officially out of the World Cup and after a short break will commence training with Xabi Alonso. Marco Palestra has officially signed for Chelsea and we have his first words. And heinous though it may be on this channel, I want to take a minute to talk about Tottenham. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And we've got news about ins and we've got news about outs today, so let's not waste any time and get into it. Football 365 posted this: Liverpool have reportedly made inquiries for both Chelsea's Pedro Neto and Manchester City's Savinho. So this one just kind of took me by surprise, and not because I didn't think it was possible, but just because with all of the other news that's been going on for a little while, Pedro Neto seems to have been forgotten about a little bit. I think it's pertinent that he wasn't listed in the untouchables list, but at the same time, he doesn't feel like one of the first guys that we need to get out of the door. But that side is starting to pile up, especially when we don't necessarily what's going on with Xabi Alonso's formation yet. If we're looking at left-footed right wingers, we've got potentially there Cole Palmer, who's not going anywhere, Esteval Willian, who's not going anywhere, Giovanni Kenda, which I've learned is the way that I need to say it. He is potentially an option for the left wing back, but also can play on right wing and also probably not going anywhere. And with obviously reduced football looking at Champions League this season, we're going to have to get rid of some players. So, look, I actually, I had a feeling a long way through the season, and I mentioned it a few times. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you remember this, that Pedro Neto might be one of the ones that we consider selling when you bear in mind the other guys we've got in that position that are all a lot younger than that as well. And if I'm completely honest, Pedro Neto seems to favour transitional style football, right? When he was at Wolves, kind of that's what they were playing, albeit he was injured a lot of the time. And he's kind of looked best in a Chelsea shirt when he's been able to react quickly and be more of a transitional footballer in a possession-based team, which is largely what we're going to be looking at. Pedro Neto had a tendency to be a little bit frustrating because he'll often get the ball, run up, get in front of someone who he doesn't think he can take on, turn around, pass the ball back to either the fullback or into the midfield, and became part of what was a bit of a frustrating recycling game that we've seen us play a lot this season. Now, when you think about who Liverpool is getting in Andoni Iraola, who's the basketball football master at the end of the day, like they live on transitional football, Pedro Neto actually could potentially really suit their style. And the other thing about it as well is they're going to need to be looking for a new right winger, and obviously if they've been inquiring about Savinho as well, they're looking for a left-footed right winger to play Andoni Iraola's transitional style of football, because Mo Salah is on his way out, and what Liverpool can't do is replace Mo Salah. Let's be completely honest, like they got him from Roma, I think it was. They didn't pay, I think they paid like 25-30 mil for him. It really wasn't a huge amount of money at all, bearing in mind how good he went on to be. But Mo Salah turned into one of the best footballers in Premier League history. Like that's not even an argument at this point, is it? Like his consistency, the goals, absolute savage efficiency in front of goal was just like an absolute joy to watch, even as a neutral. And obviously as Chelsea fans, very disappointing that we had him in our ranks, and another one like Kevin De Bruyne that Mourinho let go. But it does kind of make sense not necessarily to try and go for that mercurial style player on that side, right? When what they do have, for instance, is an Alexander Isak who obviously can perform really well in the Premier League, albeit not last season. And maybe Andoni Iraola's style is going to be more about getting the ball to the likes of Alexander Isak rather than, because when you've got Salah in your team, you kind of have to play to Salah's strengths, don't you? Because he's just been this phenomenal footballer. But Salah is leaving at the end of the day. He's gone. So it makes sense that when they're looking to reinforce that side, they're not necessarily looking to do it with the same archetypal player as Salah, where, this kind of mercurial right winger that can tear the field up all by himself. A player like Pedro Neto actually makes a lot of sense for Andoni Iraola's style of football. Pedro Neto has cut a frustrating figure. I think the issue with Pedro Neto is he's very hot and cold, right? Pedro Neto will either have a phenomenal game or just not be very good. And, I think there's a lot to be said for Pedro Neto's work rate at the end of the day. And if he were willing to be converted into a left wing back, I think that work rate could actually flourish in Xabi Alonso's football. But I don't necessarily see Neto flourishing if we go for the three at the back with the two half-space 10s. For instance, we obviously don't know that yet, but I don't necessarily see him flourishing in that role. When you look at the players that we're buying in at the moment, like Marco Palestra, he's probably going to be our starting right wing back at the end of the day, isn't he? And then obviously we're looking at Chavaria, who is more of a left back at the moment, but it's been said many times that he can play left wing back. And obviously there's Giovanni Kenda there as well, who potentially can play that role. So all of a sudden we're looking a bit stuffed in positions where we can afford to lose a couple of players, and I wouldn't be devastated to lose Pedro Neto. And what I think about Pedro Neto is he's a player that splits the fan base, right? Like, what I'm expecting in the comments from you guys is a lot of you coming in being like, absolutely, Pedro Neto can't go anywhere. And a lot of you coming in saying, Pedro Neto, whatever, just get rid of him. We've got Kenda, we've got Esteval William, we've got Cole Palmer, we've got other players now that can play these kind of positions. And the other thing about it as well, because the wing-backs looks like the thing we're going to go with. And at the moment, it's only a look like, right? Obviously, we'll see in pre-season, we'll see as the season starts how things are going to play out. No, it's not every attacking player's dream to be a wing-back at the end of the day, is it? Look at the successful wing-backs that we've had in the likes of Marcus Alonso and Victor Moses. These were not really, really well thought of attacking players at the time that they were converted. Obviously, Marcus Alonso was a left-back who turned into that really good attacking left wing-back. Victor Moses was a striker initially when we bought him, I think, but spent a lot of his time playing on the wings and in attacking midfield across various loan spells and stuff. But obviously then Antonio Conte turned him into that right wing back and kind of refreshed his career. But I don't really see Pedro Neto being at the same kind of stage in their careers. So there's an example to say, for instance, Jeremy Frimpong. Jeremy Frimpong was an attacking player who got converted into that wing back role, and it worked really well for him. And Alejandro Grimaldo was a left back that got converted into a left wing back, and that worked really well for him as well. So it's not impossible, but at the same time, I just don't see it necessarily being, at the stage of his career that he's in right now, he's 25, one of the more experienced players in the squad or whatever. If there is a team like a Liverpool that comes in for him that says, I want to use you as the attacking right winger in my basketball transitional football team, you got to think Pedro Neto is probably going to look at that and be like, yeah, sound. In terms of the money, I think Pedro Neto has performed well enough in terms of GA. What's it 10 plus GA last season to command a reasonable price. We bought him for, I think it was 50 mil. It was, I remember having a chat with Jay from Talking Chelsea, and he said it was north of 60. I wouldn't expect to get 60 mil for Pedro Neto, but I could see a 40 to 50 million pound bid being enough to dislodge Pedro Neto. Especially if, we definitely need to focus on the left side as well. We've got loads of right-sided attackers, and like I say, that position is kind of stacking up. And if Pedro Neto isn't convinced about turning into a wing back, then it'd be really interesting. But guys, I really want to know what you think about this in the comments. I think it might be polarizing. It's Football 365 as well, so it's not the biggest kind of news outlet in the world, but sometimes they do get this stuff right, and it is made inquiries, and it's including Savinho as well, which kind of makes sense when you consider both left-footed right wingers that are good in transitional attacking phases. And guys, if you've made it this far into today's episode of the Stamford Sync, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, next up, we're going to talk about centre-backs. And all of a sudden, with barely any of them being linked, there was one link for Benoit Badiashile to Lens, I think the other day, in France. All of a sudden, all of them have been linked at once. So we'll start with this tweet from PYS that was posted via Alfredo Pedula. Como also have the name of Tosin as an option for centre-back on their list. So obviously, Trevor Chalobah is the guy that they've been looking at. And they put in, I think it was just over 20 mil bid, wasn't it? It was 20 mil up to 25 plus add-ons, but we want 30, I think. It is kind of a bit of a discrepancy there. And Como have started signing players as well. There's been a couple of here we goes over the last week from Fabrizio Romano. Como are starting to build their team. But evidently, obviously, potentially there's talks about us looking at Jacobo Ramon, and that might be why they're continuing to be linked to other of our centre-backs. But Trevor Chalobah was the one that's been linked up until now. But it came out quite quickly that there was a discrepancy in the price. So a cheaper alternative, who is also relatively good at passing, albeit not quite as good as Chalobah, is Tosin To Como. We got him on a free, so anything we sell him for represents a profit. He's a very similar situation to Trevor Chalobah, but at the same time, we're not getting 30 mil for. I don't think anyone thinks we're getting 30 mil for Tosin To Como, are we? At the end of the day, so I can see it. There was some noise that came out a couple of weeks ago saying saying of the litany of centre-backs we have on our books that we would like to shift, Tosin was potentially one of the names that we were thinking about keeping because of his attitude, and he's really liked in the dressing room. He's a bit older, he's a bit experienced. So if we're looking to move on all of the centre-backs that we've got, there was some sort of idea that Tosin might be the guy that they'd like to keep. But if we sold Tosin and it meant we got to keep Chalobah, obviously I'd be buzzing about that. But I do still see Chalobah agitating for a move, especially if we're going in for Lacroix. And as we're going to get into in a minute, that could be a Premier League club. But we also know that Inter Milan has been interested in Trevor Chalobah as well. So there's Como and Inter Milan. Maybe Juventus. Juventus been linked to one of our players. Can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was Chalobah. But there's other links, and there's a couple of clubs that we've heard about. Although we only know about Crystal Palace at the moment. Like I say, we'll get onto that in a minute. Supposedly there are a few clubs in the UK that admire Trevor Chalobah. So even if we do end up selling Tosin To Como, because 10-15 mil gets that deal over the line, doesn't it? And that's 10-15 mil profit on the books, buzzing, whatever. No one will be particularly sad to see Tosin go, is the truth. Like, I understand the logic of keeping him for the vibes, essentially, for the Uncle Tosin in the dressing room. But if we're going to go out and get a player like Granit Xhaka, then maybe we don't need that as much because we have that general in the dressing room instead. So, Tosin To Como, I see it. I wouldn't be particularly sad to see him go. Like, I also wouldn't be super sad to see him stay. Like, of all of the guys that we want to get rid of, he's the only one that if we kept him, I'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. He'll play like 10 games a season or whatever, and just hopefully just be the vibes guy. And he's not like Trevor Chalobah, where he's obviously really well thought of, and there's loads of clubs that are interested in him. So it's going to be a lot easier to sell Trevor Chalobah and make a lot of profit on him. So guys, let me know what you think about Tosin To Como. Would you be happy to see Tosin go? I would imagine a lot of you would say yes, but let me know what you think in the comments. Continuing on with centre-backs, Pice also posted this via Alex Crook on TalkSport. Chelsea are prepared to offer Crystal Palace the opportunity. What opportunity? Okay. Either Chelsea are prepared to offer Crystal Palace the opportunity, choice word there, to sign either Chalobah, Disasi, Tosin or Badiashile as a potential sweetener for Lacroix. First thing that's interesting about that, no Fofana on that list. Is that indicative that Fofana actually might end up sticking around because he's on huge wages and he's going to be hard to shift at the end of the day unless a club comes in? It'd be more likely to be a loan with Chalobah, I would have thought, just so we can split the wages with the club that we send him to. But anyway, let's dissect this, right? We're in for Maxence Lacroix. The talks are going on underneath, all of the big talks at the moment have been about Pep Chavaria and Granit Xhaka, but this has been going on for a little while, and we're obviously looking to come to a friendly agreement with Crystal Palace about trying to bring Maxence Lacroix to the club. The quoted price is about 50. They want more, or in and around the £52 million that Tottenham signed Van Heck for. We're going to get on to Tottenham. And that doesn't seem like a crazy amount of money for a Lacroix, does it, at the end of the day? So it's not crazy to think that this deal is taking a little bit longer when there's some sort of thought that a player might be involved. Now, you would have thought instantly that if Crystal Palace got to choose out of all of those guys, it'd be Chalobah, right? Because he's been there already. So obviously he kind of knows the club. Obviously the management will be different and stuff, but he's succeeded well. The fans know him. He's maybe Badiashile's the youngest on this list, but still a good age. Do you know what I mean? He's younger than Lacroix, I think, or the same age. So it wouldn't be a case of like getting a player you're only going to have for a few seasons. He could really grow there. And ostensibly is the best option out of the four. Chalobah, Disasi, Tosin, Badiashile. Like, Chalobah is at the top of all of those four. But I imagine the issue would be, maybe as it is with Como, our valuation of him, right? If they're not looking to spend that much on the centre-back role to replace Lacroix, because what they're thinking is they want to go out and, kind of bolster other parts of the squad for their new manager, Pierre Sage, is it? I think it was. So Chalobah obviously would be the first choice. Disasi. Does anyone want Disasi at this point? I mean, I don't know. It's weird, actually. I'll say that. Maybe that's a little bit disrespectful to Disasi because he does keep getting these loan moves. At the end, what was it? Aston Villa back after one season, West Ham back after the other season. West Ham were obviously fighting relegation and failed, but at the end of the day, there was interest there. And at the beginning of last season, there was Wolves, Bournemouth, West Ham, and maybe that was it. But, there were clubs that were interested in him. We're not going to be looking to sell him for a huge amount of money. We bought him for £40 million, which is wild, isn't it? 40 million quid for Disasi. So that is going to be a 20-25 mil sale, but I imagine any club that comes in for him is probably going to value him at like 15 to 20, so there might be a little tussle there. But do Crystal Palace want Disasi? Don't know. Tosin To is probably the next most interesting option after Trevor Chalobah because they'd be able to pay less for for him because we got him on a free. So for instance, if we sell Disasi, let's say we sell Disasi for 25 mil, right? And we don't make the same profit that we make from selling Tosin for 10 to 15. So Tosin would be an easier deal for a lot of clubs in general. And then you've got Badiashile. And Badiashile is a bit of a wild card in this one because he's still really young. He's only like 23, 24 years old. He's a really good passer. And at the beginning of his time at Chelsea, he did really well. But I think he's kind of suffering the same sort of thing as Fofana's suffering to an extent where he's been here for a while. He's failed to get into the team and he probably feels like he just needs to go and kick on somewhere else. So Badiashile maybe might be an interesting prospect. We didn't pay a huge amount for Badiashile. I think it was like 25 to 30 mil about 3 or 4 years ago. So you're probably looking at something similar to the Disasi situation where you can sell him for 20, 25 mil and make a reasonable, a little chunk of profit kind of thing. So look, if this is an option to get Lacroix in to bring down some of that money, sweet. Do you know what I mean? Sweet. Chalobah, I don't want to see Chalobah go. I've talked about this till the cows come home, so I'll keep it brief. But I would love Chalobah to stick around as a rotational backup option. Obviously, just based on our team building, our squad building and the footballing stance, that seems like the smart thing to do. But the nuance of Chalobah's situation is very different to the rest of them. Pure profit and has actually been playing for the whole season and, it is valuable at the end of the day, which really none of the others are. Tosin's the second most valuable on this list, which is wild. Disasi probably the least. And Badiashile, maybe there's some argument to have about potential there. I'm not really sure. But if we are able to... Look, I think it'd be Chalobah, potentially Tosin. But if Tosin's wanted by Como, I can see that working too. If there is potentially still a deal to be done about Adam Wharton as well, maybe knocking a few quid off of Chalobah could help grease the wheels for that and keep stuff friendly so we can keep doing deals with them throughout the summer. But either way, guys, let me know 2 things. Who would you off this list to swap for Lacroix to bring his price down? And who do you actually think that Crystal Palace would be interested in? Let me know in the comments. Right, next up, it's Xhaka time, baby. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via James Copley. Lots of new names coming out across the Chelsea aggregators today, so that's been quite interesting. It is understood Chelsea are now set to come back with another bid for Granit Xhaka, likely to be in the region of 10 million to 12.5 million plus add-ons. So, 8 mil was the initial bid. That was laughed at by Sunderland, which completely makes sense, to be honest. This is a really difficult one to pinhole, to be honest, because what Granit Xhaka is worth to Sunderland is not what he's worth profile-wise as a player on the pitch. Like, it's the intangibles of Granit Xhaka, and those are the things that you can't really put money on. You can look at the age of a player, the position of a player. You can look at the passes, the pass completion, the goals, the assists, the chances created, the minutes, the injury stuff. Like, there's loads of things you can look at to value a player, including how much you bought him for, how much he's got left on his contract and stuff like that. But the reason that this deal is complicated and kind of weird is because the stuff that makes Granit Xhaka so incredibly valuable to Sunderland and to us is not stuff that you can just put a price on. It's really hard to put a price on personality. It's really hard to put a price on leadership. And this seems to be the issue with the Blueco stuff, right? Is because I imagine Stuart Winstanley, the guys, whoever are making the bids, are looking at Granit Xhaka and being like, he's 34 in September. What are we going to do with that? The absolute antithesis of the model, the literal antithesis of the Blueco model is Granit Xhaka, an old player with no resale value. But to Xabi Alonso, to the squad, to the actual football that we're going to play on the pitch and not the business side, he's an injection. He's a shot in the arm for Chelsea that we desperately need in terms of leadership and character. And that's obviously the reason why we're even talking about it in the first place. So you can kind of see it's similar as well with the Pep Chavaria stuff, right? Look, I've seen something crazy today saying that Rayo Vallecano, rejected the first bid, but, it's because he's got a 50 million euro release clause. Like, that's wild, man. Like, we're not paying 50 million euros for Pep Chavaria, like 40 million pounds. Spanish players in Spain are legally obliged to have release clauses, and there's been some wild ones as well. Some, like, I remember Barcelona went through this period of when they were signing up La Masia graduates to new deals. They were putting like £500 million release clauses on them and stuff like that. It's a legal obligation, and it's just another way to kind of fight people off. And there's no way that Pep Chavaria is anywhere worth near that. But yeah, sorry, a little tangent there. But yeah, the thing with Granit Xhaka is he's worth more to Sunderland than his profile would suggest. And it's so obvious. Like, Granit Xhaka has been lauded by content creators, by pundits, by football watchers, in general, as one of the best signings in the Premier League last season. Like, that's just there for everyone to see. His quality has taken Sunderland from being promoted from the Championship, which he obviously wasn't a part of, But not only did he keep them up, which is the conversation you have at the start of the season, isn't it? It's always who stays up, who goes down. A lot of people are always like, it probably, Sunderland might go down because they've just been promoted. But buying Granit Xhaka was an absolute masterstroke, and he was integral to their team. So when we talk about 10 to 12.5 million pounds, that might make sense financially from the business side, but Sunderland look at that and being like, what are we going to do with 12.5 million pounds? Like, you can't go out and, identifying players like Granit Xhaka is so hard. Like, he is a bit of a unicorn in that respect. And, arguably, they did it in the first place, and maybe they could do it again. But those qualities about Granit Xhaka are really, really obvious, I think, in the grand scheme of things, when you see what he did at Bayer Leverkusen. He was 30-odd when he did that as well. So he's kind of really come into his prime at the back end of his career. So, yeah, like I say, the 10 to 12.5 million pounds, I know I've had some chats with you guys in the comments about this before. A couple of you have said, yeah, 8 million's fine because he's going to be 34 in September. And it's like, yeah, I get that. That's true. But Sunderland can't just go and reinvest that 12.5 million in what they lose in Granit Xhaka. So to them, he's going to be worth a lot more than that. He's really going to be worth a lot more than that. It's a really difficult one. So look, the fact that we're going in with a pittance really of an improvement of a bid compared to the money that was coming out, like apparently we weren't willing to pay, there was a tweet that said we weren't willing to pay the 25 to 30 million pounds that Sunderland valued him at, because it's such a massive departure from what his book worth is, right? The fact that we've upped our bid by such a small amount is indicative, unfortunately, along with some other news as well, that Granit Xhaka is really looking to push this bid, to kind of push this move through. And there's been sort of terse talks about him going on strike and stuff like that. Like, I hate this stuff, man. I hate this stuff. I don't like the idea of mugging off Sunderland at the end of the day. Like, and it's not my money, and the club is what the club is, but I just don't like it when this kind of thing happens. I feel like that we need to be better than that. I just genuinely feel like we need to be a little bit better than that. But at the same time, I would really like to see him at the club. We've already mugged him off with the Mark Yu thing, where we loaned him and then took him back straight away. So it's like every time we try and do business with Sunderland since they've come back into the Premier League, something shady goes on. So look, 10 to 12.5 million pounds, I think it's probably going to end up being, if we get him, and I genuinely do think we will, because it sounds like the player is really pushing to make this happen. And unfortunately, he does have a lot of power, because he doesn't have a huge amount of time left in his career, and Sunderland are not just going to bench him. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing, is like, if Sunderland keep him, it's because they want those intangible qualities, which unfortunately are based around him being happy at the club and being really invested and involved with what he's doing. If they don't end up selling him and they keep him, and he thinks, right, well, I've just got to see these next 2 years out, then he'll probably down tools, because he's getting paid what he's paid. He's at the back end of his career already, and if he doesn't think he's going to be able to get that future move, maybe that takes a lot of the wind out of his sails. I even hate talking about this kind of stuff, because that's not what you want to see from football players, especially ones as gifted now as Granit Xhaka is. But unfortunately, Granit Xhaka does have quite a lot of leverage in this situation. I really don't want to see it go this way. I just want Chelsea to go in with a reasonable bid. We buy him, it happens, but it's already a bit raw for like a couple of Sunderland fans. You have come at me in the comments for even just talking about this. Like, I think I'm being quite generous, in terms of not, considering the Sunderland angle and understanding why it's not as easy as just giving £8 million for Granit Xhaka. But some of you guys have proper come at me in the comments about him, and it's funny. But at the same time, it's like, I do get it. Like, I do get it. But, I think this is just one that feels like it's going to happen, because if it doesn't happen, that probably ends up being worse for Sunderland, because they don't get any money in to reinvest into the squad, and potentially you get less than half of the Granit Xhaka you had last season, which isn't ideal, and you don't really want someone like that on your team. But it's just feels like the kind of situation we've been pulled into. I don't like messy transfers. This one's starting to feel like one. But guys, let me know what you think about it all in the comments. Right, moving on. We're going to talk a little bit about Nicholas Jackson, who is out of the World Cup. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Fabrizio Romano. Xabi Alonso is set to assess Nicholas Jackson. There are several clubs keen, but Chelsea are yet to decide if they want to keep Jackson at the club, sell him, or loan him out. Jackson has not torn up trees at the World Cup. The most positive thing, I think, contribution from Jackson, as far as I can remember, having not watched all the Senegal games, by the way. So if you did, let me know in the comments if I've missed something else really good. But there was the ball striking unlocked moment, wasn't there, where he kind of had this wicked shot. Obviously, it didn't go in, but he's not really torn up trees at the end of the day. So in terms of selling him on, we're not looking at a more valuable Nicholas Jackson than we were at the end of his Bayern Munich season. So it looks like he's coming back, and we already knew that Xabi Alonso was going to take a look at him, because the versatility is interesting, because he can play on the left, he can play up top, I still would like to give him a shot. I think that a bad Nicholas Jackson is 10 times better than a good Liam Delap. Or maybe that's harsh because we've never seen a good Liam Delap. But Liam Delap had 41 opportunities to play last season and only managed 2 goals and 3-4 assists across the entire season. And that's a shame because we saw Liam Delap between the Club World Cup and pre-season got 3 goals. So he literally managed more in that 2 months than he managed in the entire season. Albeit he was out for a while, but even with being out for a while, he got 41 appearances and still just couldn't do it at all. So I would much rather see a Nicholas Jackson in that backup striker role. But look, I don't think Nicholas Jackson's necessarily going to come and absolutely tear up trees and score 20 goals or whatever, but I think he'd score more than 2. And when you think we just need to improve, we just need to get better. The other thing with Nicholas Jackson as well, because he's versatile, he can be part of good link-up play as well, and it'd be interesting to see. He already had that kind of good relationship with Cole Palmer. What could we see with a João Pedro in that mix as well, and potentially the likes of an Esteval Willian? So maybe Nicholas Jackson, we can see a new version of Nicholas Jackson because what we can provide around him that we didn't really have because we had Mykhailo Mudryk and a brand new Pedro Neto who was bedding into the team and stuff like that in the last season. So I would still like to see Jackson given an opportunity, but I want to know what you guys think. Marco Palestra is a Chelsea player. Obviously we got the here we go, about a week ago, something like that, but now he said something, so let's have a little look. Pice posted this via Chelsea FC. Breaking. Chelsea announced the signing of Marco Palestra. I'm very excited to get started. I've felt the energy since the first day Chelsea wanted me. Can't wait to start. See all the fans, teammates and manager. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? We have so many talented players here, a very strong squad and a manager in Xabi. He spoke to me about how he wants us to play, which is exciting, and we can't wait to compete in the Premier League. So, he passes the media-trained answer section of his introduction at Chelsea. Very good, calm, articulate media answer. I'll be interested. I haven't actually heard him speak. I'll be interested to see how good his English is. But yeah, I'm excited about Marco Palestra, man. Like I say, he's the first indication of how we're going to play because he's a right wing back. There's been a few other bits as well. Chelsea asked him how do you like to play, and he's like, I love 1v1s. I like to take people on. It's brilliant, fantastic, because between Pedro Neto and Alejandro Garnacho for the whole of the last season, that's something that we saw not very often at all. So a player that can take on his man is something we've absolutely been missing. And also another one of these pieces, he was talking about why he made the decision and stuff, and he said the manager was so important. The call with Xabi Alonso was really, really, really important. We know that it was kind of against the grain because he wanted to stay in Italy, and obviously we offered him a lot more money, but he seemed quite keen to stay in Italy, and obviously Inter Milan were really close to getting that deal done. But A, we offered him a load more money, which is always a good thing, but B, the other thing is the Xabi Alonso angle. He came in, and despite him wanting to stay in Italy and already knowing that he can perform really well there at the age of 21, by the way, which is a massive point. If you're a 21-year-old that's just won the defender of the season and been fouled the most times, and you're looking at going to one of the bigger clubs, that's Italian guys love staying in Italy. It happens quite a lot, but we managed to circumvent that and bring him over to Chelsea, A, with the money, but B, also with the conversation with Xabi Alonso. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. Let me know what you think. And last but not least, guys, I want to talk about Tottenham. This is wild, man. This is wild. So I want to talk about Tottenham. We're going to look at the signings that they've made, which are here. And we're going to talk about a conversation that Gabby Agbonlahor, obviously ex-Aston Villa player, had with Andy Goldstein on TalkSport. So, less than a month into the window, because the window opened on the 15th of June. So what's that like? Just over 2 weeks into the window. We're genuinely only 2 weeks into the window. Tottenham, who finished 17th last season, they finished 17th the season before, and the relegation battle last season took them to the last day. They went through 3 managers. They've gone through loads of managers, but last season they went through 3 different managers. De Zerbi came in and kept them up. In the first 2 weeks of the transfer window, they have signed Sandro Tonali, just got the here we go, going to be 100 mil plus. Mateus Fernandes, 85 mil from West Ham, who was being courted by Real Madrid. Now that maybe works in our favour because maybe that now puts them a little bit more towards Enzo Fernandez. Marco Senesi from Bournemouth, who they got on a free but is getting paid big wages. Jan-Paul van Hecke, who was the best centre-back outside of the top 6 rated by SofaScore last season, and he did have a really good season, and he was my pick before the Lacroix stuff. I really like the look of him. Andy Robertson on a free, okay, but really experienced Premier League winner, Champions League winner. And Martin Dubravka as a backup to Kinski, who's a good, experienced Premier League goalkeeper. They have spent already 100 mil, 185, over 200 mil. I can't remember how much they spent on Dubravka. I'm not sure if it was a free transfer or not, but they've also got 2 very smart free transfers. after finishing 17th and nearly getting relegated on the last day, Tottenham have already spent nearly half of what Liverpool spent after winning the league. So look, there's kind of two conversations that I want to have here, and what this is, like this, I'm going to give my opinion and stuff, but I really want to know what you guys think about this. The first thing is, yikes, look at the experience that they're bringing into their team. 5 good Premier League players. Sandro Tonali, really highly rated. Mateus Fernandes, really highly rated. Marcus Senesi, big part of getting Bournemouth into Europe last season. Jan-Paul Van Hecke, phenomenal player, really highly rated. Andy Robertson, experience, will be a big voice in the dressing room. Martin Dubravka, the kind of keeper that we should have as a backup instead of a 22-year-old, which is what we've been doing for a while. This is wild, man. Like, that is some rebuild, isn't it? That is really, really some rebuild. Like, De Zerbi and Tottenham are not wasting any time at all. And the thing that I really want to talk about here is so Gabby Agbonlahor had a conversation with Andy Goldstein on TalkSport, and it was about how is this fair, right? How is this fair? Aston Villa got into the Champions League last season. Brilliant. Well done to them. They've, a couple of seasons over the last few, they've got into the Champions League now. They are slowly pushing on and on. They're becoming a bit more of a force in football. They're becoming a difficult team to beat. Unai Emery, fantastic manager. But they have been unable to go out and spend this kind of cash, and they've been unable to attract these kind of players. So similar to the Chelsea situation, Aston Villa have a couple of times now been penalised by UEFA for overspending, right? Because when you're in European competition, I'll try and keep this brief, you're only allowed to spend up to 70% of your annual turnover on playing stuff. And if you go over that, you get sanctioned by UEFA. Now, that's not going to be a problem for Chelsea this year because we're not in Europe. And the new Premier League rules, the domestic rules, allow up to 85%. So we're allowed to spend up to 85% of our annual turnover on players this season. That's cool, but Aston Villa can't do that. So how are Aston Villa finishing in the top 4 and Tottenham are nearly getting relegated, but they are able to spend half of what the Premier League leaders spent at the beginning of last summer? So the truth is, and a guy, Kieran Maguire, I think he said his name was, sort of left a note for Andy Goldstein to read out. But basically, the thing with it is Tottenham, their money doesn't really come from them as much being a football club. Now, obviously it does, but obviously last season, they finished 17th. Tottenham's money comes from the way that they use their stadium. So they built this stadium, this grand, phenomenal stadium, and they use it to host NFL games and put on concerts and this go-karting stuff. And they are making bank year on year by renting out their stadium for other events, right? That is where a massive, massive chunk of Tottenham's revenue comes from. Obviously, they've had the same, they stick with their sponsors for quite a long time as well. So unlike Chelsea, they've got consistently good sponsor deals, regardless of kind of where they sit, because they're Tottenham. So, this was a really bitter pill for Gabby Agbonlahor to swallow. And one of the really difficult things about that is the difference between Tottenham finishing 17th and nearly getting relegated last season and Aston Villa finishing 4th in terms of Premier League revenue. The difference is £30 million. Wild how little that is at the end of the day. So the question that Gabby Agbonlahor was asking is, how is this fair? Aston Villa are doing all of the right things at the end of the day. They've hired the right manager. They're getting the right players in. They are making smart loan moves halfway through the season to try and push them on. And they're getting into Europe. They're doing all of the right things, but they're being penalised and punished by UEFA for overspending. And they're now not, they can't go out and have this generational kind of transfer window like Tottenham are doing. And that is probably a large reason why we've just seen the price for Morgan Rogers is 130 mil. And that is also another reason why they'd even consider selling Morgan Rogers in the first place, because they need to bring in money if they want to be able to reinvest it into their squad. And it's, if you sell Morgan Rogers for 130 mil, then ideally you can go out and buy 2 or 3 players for, between 30 to 50 mil each to reinforce the areas of your squad that you need to. So is it fair? Is it fair? So if Aston Villa were putting on concerts, go-karts and, hosting NFL games and bringing in all this money, maybe they'd be able to do the same thing, but they're not. Tottenham is run as a business in this respect. Like it's not just a football club. It's like a massive conglomerate. It's an entertainment business that uses their stadium to generate lots and lots of extra income. So the question is it fair? On the face of it, I mean, I understand Gabby Agbonlahor's view. Like, he's watching Aston Villa scrape to the Champions League spots and still be penalised for it. And then, you're watching Tottenham nearly get relegated and buy in two of the most highly rated midfielders in the Premier League, two of the most highly rated centre-backs in the Premier League outside of the top six, a guy that's won the Champions League and the Premier League, and Martin Dubravka, who's a good, sort of goalkeeper replacement. And it's like, wow, you got to think any Aston Villa fan would be buzzing if they'd signed these 6 players already. So like I said, the question for me is like, is it fair? I find that really, really interesting, because on the face of it, the answer to that question is yes, because Tottenham are bringing in legitimate money into their club via other means that aren't football. Aston Villa, not so much. It also makes me think this is probably a big reason why Chelsea want to not only expand the stadium. It's not only going to be for the football, to be able to get more fans in on match day. It's probably also so we can do more things like Tottenham are doing at the moment. We can host big concerts with Madonna, and we can have go-karts, and do you know what I mean? We can host NFL games. Obviously, we've got American owners, so you got to think American owners would love the idea, of hosting these kind of games. Maybe they've got some connections already, and it's waiting to happen or whatever. But, that also now makes me think, oh, okay, that's almost definitely what Blueco would want to do if we do build a new stadium somewhere, is try and generate these kinds of revenue. They'll be looking at Tottenham's revenue income and seeing them finish 17th and spending all this money and being like, yeah, we need to get us a piece of that pie. So, guys, is it fair? Is it fair that in the game of football, Aston Villa are doing everything correct in terms of getting into the Champions League, getting the right manager, trying to buy the right players, being smart with their signings, albeit overspending a little bit in order to get where they are, and they cannot go out and do something like this? And is it fair that Tottenham are able to bring in all of this income from non-footballing activities and plummet into their first team? So that is a question that I want you to answer in the comments. I'm kind of undecided on it yet, because it's a yes and a no for me. It's like, yeah, Tottenham are bringing revenue in from extraneous sources, but they are doing it all legitimately, and it's all being funneled through the club, so they have the money there at the end of the day. But also, I feel bad for like an Aston Villa who are doing everything right in a footballing sense. And then you've also got to think of the likes of Newcastle, for instance, who have the richest owners in the Premier League, but are losing Tonali. They've lost Anthony Gordon for 70 mil to Barcelona. They're potentially losing Bruno Guimaraes to Arsenal for probably a significant sum as well, because they're unable to generate the funds they need to, because the majority of their activities are football related activities, and they're not performing well enough in order to make this happen, and they're not getting these massive, huge, big international fan bases either. So look, because it's not just Aston Villa, it is Aston Villa, it's Tottenham, Sunderland, at the end of the day, like Sunderland, have just been promoted from the Championship. Cool, they've stayed in the Premier League, they've finished really high, but also they're looking like they're going to struggle to hang on to some of their better players, even though they finished above us. We're still going in for Granit Xhaka, and we still look like a better option. So let me know what you think about it, guys. Tottenham's generational window winning in the first 2 weeks is mental, absolutely mental, and I'll be interested to see how they keep going. Look, the one thing I will say, from a Chelsea fan's perspective, I know exactly how difficult it is to completely rebuild your team and then kick on. And also, we saw that with Liverpool last season. Liverpool spent loads of money, changed out half of their team, and it was really difficult to pull it all together. So this isn't necessarily saying that Tottenham are just going to come in and walk it, but you would have thought they'd at least have finished comfortably higher than 17th with the manager they've got and the signings that they're making. And then, and B, is it fair? Like, is it fair that this is the way that football is? Should football money be more restricted and only be connected to your footballing activities? Is it okay how it is, where you're allowed to do things like Tottenham are doing with the NFL games, the go-karts and stuff, to bring in extra money? Tell me what you think about that. Or should football be opened up, and if your owners have the money, a la Roman Abramovich, they can funnel it into the club without any repercussions and none of the PSR and stuff? Let me know what you think about that in the comments. Nice one, guys. I'm going to wrap the video up there, but like I say, I really want to know. This has turned into a long one, and I really did not expect it to. But I really want to know what you think about everything that we've talked about today. Supposedly, Liverpool have made an inquiry about Pedro Neto. How do you feel about that? Do you think we should keep him, or if a good bid of 40 to 50 mil comes in, should we let him go? Como supposedly want a Tosin To Como, and also we are looking to offer a Darabioyo, Chalobah, Badiashile and Disasi to Crystal Palace, in return for Maxence Lacroix. Another Granit Xhaka bid incoming, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a huge amount more. Do you think this is going to get messy? Nicholas Jackson's coming back for pre-season. Do you think he's going to impress Xabi Alonso? Marco Palestra says his first words as a Chelsea player. Do you think he's going to kick on for us this season? And the Tottenham situation. Tell me what you think. Like I say, how do you think Tottenham are going to do next season based on the players that they've already brought in before they go and get anyone else? And B, do you think it's fair that a club that nearly got relegated for the last 2 seasons in a row are able to go on and spend a generational amount of money to improve their squad, where clubs like Aston Villa and Newcastle are finding it a lot more difficult despite having rich owners? Nice one, guys. Thanks very much for sticking around until the end of the video. If you did, I will catch up with all of you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.